Hey guys, and welcome to episode 264 of the OCDstories.com podcast. Now, as always, thank you so much for listening. I deeply appreciate it. And in this episode, I chat with Mike Vatter, who has come on to share his story with us. Mike is on the board of OCD Jacksonville, an affiliate of the ISDF. And in our conversation, Mike goes into sharing his OCD experiences, things having to be just right. He talks about panic attacks, hitting breaking point. He talks about pulling hair and how his first therapist thought he didn't have OCD. Eventually, how a hit and run OCD episode helped him get an OCD diagnosis. Using humour to make it easier. Meeting his biological parents and the story behind that. And we discussed much, much more. It was a really interesting conversation with Mike. I think you're going to enjoy it. And this episode is sponsored by NoCD, and NoCD have now launched in the United Kingdom, my home country. They've worked really hard over the last sort of 5 or so years to really improve access to therapy for OCD. So it's wonderful to see them cross the Atlantic Ocean and into the UK. So if you want to find out more about that, I'll put the link in the episode description, or go to go.treatmyocd.com/the OCD stories. So thank you to those guys for sponsoring the show and for their hard work. And without further ado, here is Mike. On the podcast today, I have Mike Vatter, who has kindly agreed to share his story with us. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the podcast. And of course, you interviewed me, 6 months ago. So
Yes.
It's nice to return the favor. So as you know, it would be great to hear your story, OCD or otherwise.
Yeah, my story is I don't know how interesting it is. I was first diagnosed with OCD in my late 30s. I'm 44 now. I think I probably always showed signs of it though. I was my mom, I'm adopted, so I just found my birth parents in the last, my birth mother I found about 2 years ago, my birth father about a year ago. But my parents who raised me, my parents, not my biological parents, my parents always said that, a little OCD is a good thing. And they meant that in the nicest way possible, because I showed signs of having OCD at a very, very young age. I was probably 3 when I was exhibiting symptoms, which of course back then they didn't really know. No one really knew what OCD was, especially in a child. But little things. I was always very, as much as a 3-year-old can be, I was always very opinionated and organized. And I showed very early signs of having that other voice, that other, personality kind of in my head that would, correct me when no one else would. And things had to be a certain way. And I would get very upset if things weren't just right, and my parents couldn't figure out really what that was, why I was that way. But they knew that it was something that was innate, and they couldn't do really anything about it. If I got to the point that I was obstinate, I guess would be a good word for it, or acting out in a way that was kind of goofy or odd, my dad would call it a case of the sillies, or he would say, Mike's in his mood, or one of his modes, or, he'd kind of just try to explain it away. But my mom, being a teacher, my dad was in law enforcement. So he kind of just, his life, before that he was military, he was in the Navy. So his life was always very rigid and full of rules. But my mom was a teacher, so she was always around kids, and she kind of was easy. It was easier for her to kind of explain things in almost a psychological way. She could look at me and see a lot of her students and say, okay, I've seen this behavior in other people's kids. How do I apply it to my own child? And my sister, 18 months older than I, had shown symptoms of I guess what they would now consider to be like maybe a borderline personality disorder or a bipolar disorder. And we're not biologically related, but my mom had seen kind of things in my sister that she kind of would say, okay, well, we know it's not that, but what is this that my son is now displaying. So, my mom did a little bit of research, what was available at the time for child psychology. And she said, okay, I think this might be an obsession kind of disorder. And she would say, OCD is a good thing. And a little bit of OCD is a good thing. He's never late. He's always very, very well behaved. And, if things became too hectic for me, or things weren't the way I wanted them to be, I would retreat to my room and organize my Lego blocks by color and size. And I would line up my Matchbox cars by, they have Matchbox cars in the UK?
We do,
okay.
yeah.
I don't know if that's a brand it's ubiquitous, or if it's just the US that has Matchbox, but the little Matchbox cars. I'd line them up by color, and all the blue ones first, and then if it was blue and then it had a little bit of yellow, those would go next, and then the yellow ones, and then if it was yellow with a little bit of orange, then those would go next, and then the orange ones. And it got to the point that my mom would, go to the store and get bins so I could keep them all separated, because she knew that made me happy. So she was accommodating me without realizing she was accommodating me, but it made me happy, and it kept me calm, and I didn't have my little fits. But yeah, that was my earliest displays. But yeah, it wasn't until my mid to late 30s I was officially diagnosed. And it was because my husband came home from work and found me laying on the bedroom floor in just a complete panic attack, because I just knew it was one of those spirals. I just knew, because of a typo or a misprint or something in an email that I'd sent at work, I was going to get fired, and then we were going to lose all of our money, and then we were going to lose the house, and we were going to lose the cars, and we were going to end up on welfare, and our world was going to come crashing down because of some simple mistake that ended up being nothing. But I had just spiraled and gone into a full-blown panic attack, and he thankfully came home before I had gone into any sort of really deep spiral. And I don't know what would have happened, because I'd never had a panic attack as an adult that bad. But yeah, I mean, it was full on hyperventilating, crying, shaking, kind of just I picture the Blob from the horror movies. I was like this, or in the movie Airplane, that that shaking thing of Jello mold. Just laying on the floor. And he came home, and he was like, at first he thought I was playing or just being silly, or he didn't know what to think. He was like, what are you doing? And I was so over the top dramatic, he really thought I was just acting or putting him on. And he kind of said, he stopped and said, oh, you're not joking. No, I'm clearly I'm not joking. And he wanted to call an ambulance or something, and I knew enough to say, I'm not, I don't need an ambulance, but I don't know what it is I do need. And I started seeing a therapist, shortly thereafter. It was the wrong therapist. I found out after about 2 years of wasting time and money on that therapist. I found out they didn't know what they were doing as far as OCD goes. But yeah, it was a struggle. But now I see a great talk therapist, and I see a great psychologist, two separate therapists. And I've joined OCD Jacksonville, which is a great organization. I'm also a board member of OCD Jacksonville, and I help run one of the support groups, and I'm a member of another one of the support groups, and I help with their board and their activities. And I'm on medication, and my world has gone completely the opposite direction of where it could have gone. But yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's kind of my story. I obviously skipped a big gap of years there, but yeah, that's kind of the short version of it.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing. And don't worry, I've got some questions that might take you
I'm
back.
sure. I didn't want to spend too much time in the details, because I figured you had some questions.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so is your husband, right? Not partner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
Yeah.
when your husband found you, yeah. So
I know no one can see that I'm wearing a ring, but
oh
I
yeah,
wanted to.
sorry, yeah, you just
Yeah.
moved your hand up. Yeah, so when your husband found you, was that like, because some people talk about like, I had sort of traits as a kid, and then suddenly they kind of say, I remember the day my brain broke, tongue
Yeah.
twister.
Yeah.
Was it like that for you, or was it like a slow build up in your 20s and early 30s to get to this point, or did it just kind of snap overnight, so to speak?
I can look back and see other times that my brain broke in small fragments,
Mm.
but that was the day I would say it broke completely.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what led up to that, what caused that hard break.
Mm.
But there were splinters for sure over the years, and maybe at the time they felt like hard breaks, but I didn't know what the cause was. I could always dismiss them as something else in the moment,
Yeah.
a breakup or a job loss or a bad day or a car accident or whatever. You can always pinpoint it and dismiss it, when you're
Yeah.
in a bad moment. But yeah, that was probably the worst of it.
Mm. Yeah. And so when your husband found you, you're kind of in that state, and then that was the kind of the starting point of you seeking help. So over the last so has that been what, sort of 6-7 years since that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we could round up and say 10, make it easy. But
Okay.
yeah,
10. Yeah. Let's say.
yeah,
So let's say in those first 5 of those 10 years, because obviously it's not like you seek help, and obviously you said it was the wrong person initially,
yeah,
but it's not like even if you get the right person, it's going to like instantly change overnight.
right.
So yeah, what were some of the like worries and concerns or themes or obsessions you were dealing with in those early years of when that kicked off?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, well, so in that time of those 10 years, if you want to focus on those, I
Yeah.
mean, my obsessions were always, um, so I guess I'd have to go back even before that,
Yeah.
because my obsessions have always been, what people consider pure O.
Mm.
They've always been in my head.
Okay.
I was never the door checker. I was never the light switch flicker. I was never the counter. That I thought. I should say I thought I was never any of those things, because I didn't do anything outward that people noticed. I always picked at my cuticles. I always bit my nails. I always plucked nose hairs, but there were always things. I know that's just one that I always mention, and people go, "Oh, you do that? I didn't know that was an OCD thing. The plucking the nose hairs." And people, obviously people can't see me on this interview, but I have a shaved head. And people, when I mention plucking nose hairs, they ask, did I pull out any of my hair? Do I have a shaved head because I pulled my hair out? And I just will mention very quickly, I shaved my head because I worked with a woman who had cancer, and a bunch of us shaved our heads in solidarity for her. And I liked the way it looked, so I kept shaving it. So pulling my hair on my head was never an issue, but I did I overplucked my eyebrows. I would pull on my eyelashes. I would pull on my nose hairs. But the reason I focused on nose hairs is because nobody could see them. And that was something that was very important to me. I don't know if it was a vanity thing or if it was a shame thing. I think it was more of a shame thing. I could pick at my cuticles because as a little kid, I guess biting your nails was kind of accepted, or no one ever got on to me for it. So I could pick at my cuticles, I could bite my nails, and no one ever really made a big deal out of it. So it was something I could do and didn't get a whole lot of flack for. So I guess I tested my limits with my OCD without really realizing it. Or my OCD tested my limits for me, and I didn't realize that's what was happening. So those outward things that I did, I didn't realize were OCD. The counting I did do, but didn't know it was an OCD thing. I would count steps as I went up and down stairs. I would count the steps. I didn't count steps in any other place. I didn't count them, walking along like, segmented floors like tiles or planks. I always counted, if I was putting laundry into a machine, I would count the number of items of clothing, which is completely ridiculous because it doesn't matter if you have, 8 socks and 4 pairs of jeans and 12 towels. The amount of laundry that it fills up for that is going to be totally different than the next load if you have, twice as many pairs of pants and less towels and 4 times as many socks. The load is going to be different. So the amount of something is different. It's not like it loaded up the machine differently if you had a different number. Yeah. So it was not something that I was consciously trying to come out with a certain outcome. I just was mindlessly counting these numbers. But if it wasn't an odd number at the end, it didn't feel right. Mm-hmm. And that was a problem. And I didn't know it was a problem. Volume controls on TVs or radios or, as I got older, I'm going to date myself, Walkmans, cassette players, boom boxes, CD players. Yeah, vinyl. I was a little younger, but yeah, I did have turntables. I have a turntable now, but now it's cool to have a turntable. Yeah. But the volume control had to be an odd number. Mm. Or it had to be symmetric. If 3 was good, 6 was okay because it was 2 3s, things like that, and that was okay. But or 10 because it was 2 5s. But an even number that wasn't symmetric was bad. But I didn't know why, and it's just the way it had to be. If a table was set wrong, I would lose my mind. I didn't know why. But those things I'd never attributed to a disorder. So those, and I think I've lost the point of your question, but I think I'm giving good information. Yeah. So those were the kinds of obsessions that I had, but I think I'm circling back to it. When I started seeking therapy, it was not that I went looking for an OCD therapist because I didn't know I had OCD. But in the course of my therapy with that first therapist, who was obviously not the right therapist for me, I said, I think I have OCD. I'm learning about this and I think I have it. And he said, no, you don't. And what do you mean, no, I don't? He said, you're not doing any of the things somebody with OCD would do. And I was like, but I am, because I'm researching it, and I really feel like I know people who have OCD, and I'm doing some of the things that they're doing. And I think if you looked at this, you'd see that I do. And he's like, no, you don't do any of those things. I'm like, but I know I do. Just because you don't see them, I know I'm doing them. And, I felt like I was spinning my wheels with him. I was kind of trying to convince him I had OCD, which is not what you're supposed to be doing with a therapist. I'm telling you what's wrong with me, and you're not listening. So I actually was on a work trip with an associate who happened to be our work psychologist, because I worked for a nonprofit and we had an on-staff psychologist. And we were driving to Ocala, which is the deepest part of Ocala from Jacksonville. Is about 3 hours away. And we were driving to an event, and actually we were driving home from an event. It was very late at night, and we were in a rental car, and I was driving, and she was nodding off in the passenger seat after a long day of working. And I swerved in the road because I knew I had hit a bicyclist. And I didn't want to wake her. I don't know why. Obviously, if I'd hit a bicyclist, I would want to wake the passenger and and get as much help as possible. I didn't want to wake her. I swerved. That woke her up. I didn't tell her why, but I turned around in the median and went back. And the road is completely empty. It's late at night, and we're in the middle of nowhere in the country. And I drove back around and circled about 3 or 4 times, and I wouldn't tell her why. And I was determined to find this bicyclist that I'd hit. And she finally said, what are you doing? And I finally confessed and said, I've hit somebody. And she said, no, you must have fallen asleep, or you imagined it or something. You couldn't have hit somebody. We would have, I would have, there'd be damage on the windshield or something. B, I would have heard it, C, like, here's 1,000 reasons why I don't think you hit anybody, and I was asleep. So we pulled over and we looked at the car. There's no damage. We've now circled this same spot, I don't know, umpteen times. And she could see logically that I was, upset over nothing, and there was no damage. There was no trace of anybody who'd been hit. We would have seen them. I mean, you can see a country mile, even in the dark, you can see a pretty good distance. And she said, you didn't hit anybody. She said, but I'll drive the rest of the way. You need to just calm down. And the next morning I went into the office, and she said, I stayed up all night thinking about what happened last night. And she said, there's this test I want you to take. And I said, okay. And she said, I don't want you to put too much thought into it. It's just a series of questions. Just answer them honestly. First answer that comes to your head. And I filled out this form, and it was like 30 something questions. I didn't give it much thought. I tried not to obsess over the questions because I didn't know what her goal was. And I thought she was going to have a guy with I thought of Monty Python with the guy in the white coat with the big giant butterfly net come and get me if I didn't answer these questions exactly right. And I answered it, and she looked at it and she said, I'm not an expert in this field, but I'd bet my house you've got obsessive compulsive disorder. And I said, oh my God, yes, I've been trying to tell my psychiatrist I have obsessive compulsive disorder. And she said, this is the name of a therapist I think you should try to make an appointment with. And that therapist had a waiting list that was months long, because there's only 4 or 5 really honestly trained OCD therapists in Jacksonville. And I called, and she happened to have an opening. She said, I just had a baby and I have no free time. I have no free appointments. If you can be here this Wednesday at 3:00, I just had a cancellation. And I said, I will clear my calendar. I will figure it out. And I've been seeing this therapist ever since. And this was, I don't remember how many years ago now, but yeah, so that was the start of my true OCD recovery journey. And then she recommended a psychologist, and I've been on meds, and I still get nervous. I still have, small panic attacks over silly things, but I'm so much better than I was. I can let things slide. I don't have to, have the volume on certain levels. I can look at an unset table and not freak out. And yeah, I'm going to let you ask your next question, because I know I got way off topic on that.
No, you didn't. There's no off topics on this podcast. No, it was a good story. And yeah, I guess if you're going to have an OCD episode, having like a trained psychiatric or psychologist next to you is useful.
It's like having a heart attack with a paramedic in the car.
Exactly. So was that the first time, because people call it hit and run OCD, is that the first time you'd experienced that obsession, or did that come up before when you were driving?
That specific hit and run, that exact one, yes. I'd had similar where I thought I'd hit a cat or a dog or something, okay. and I turned around and looked for it, and it turned out to be a pothole or debris in the road or something, where it actually I'd felt the sensation of hitting a thing, and I was convinced it was a living being, but that was the first time I'd had no indication that I'd hit anything, but was convinced that I had. Yeah. And I will say that for the sake of your ease and the sake of your listeners, I do another thing that my therapist calls, she calls it lecturing, which is another type of OCD that I didn't know was OCD, or it's another compulsion, I guess. But I call it professoring, because to me, lecturing sounds like someone getting onto their child. Or scolding somebody. Yeah. She says it's lecturing, like when a professor lectures their college class. They give a lesson, they teach. So I call it professoring because it sounds a little smarter. But I ramble. I tell a story in much deeper detail than it needs to be. So I think that's what I was just doing. And that's why I need to acknowledge that I just did it, because it helps me. And it also maybe explains to your listeners something that maybe they don't know is an OCD thing, that I do, and maybe they'll learn from it too.
Yeah, no, that's useful. No, I don't think you were rambling. I think it was when a good story is involved, I don't think there's can be too much detail.
I
Uh,
appreciate that.
yeah, no
Don't
worries.
accommodate me.
Yeah, I wasn't. I was telling the truth. There's a
Thank you.
difference.
I appreciate that.
But if you ramble, I will let you know. Okay.
Challenge accepted, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so going back to when you like the symmetry and the numbers and the odds and evens and you mentioned there kind of with one of them it not feeling right. Was that a common issue around kind of things just not feeling right and having to do it or get it right or match it until it felt okay?
Yeah, that's something that's been the most dominant of my idiosyncratic of my OCD symptoms. And it's for anyone who hasn't experienced it, if there's anyone listening who doesn't have that particular obsession, or if it's a loved one who's listening, is a loved one of an OCD sufferer, the best way I can describe it is it's like a tingling in the middle of my spine that then radiates up and down, like from that central point. It feels like a jellyfish sting that starts in the middle of my spine and then travels up and down at the same time from that central point. And it's like all my nerve endings are on fire from that jellyfish sting. And the intensity of that sting will depend on how bad the thing bothers me. So if I walk into a room and a picture is crooked on the wall, and if it's my space, if it's like my house or my office or someplace that belongs to me, I immediately am aware, I'm acutely aware of something's wrong in this space. And I'm going to hone in on it and I'm going to go fix it. I have to fix it. I read somewhere that people who have perfectionism, in the sense of they are a perfectionist, not an OCD sufferer. They just are a perfectionist. They want the world to be perfect because they want it to look nice. Someone with OCD perfectionism will rearrange the furniture in the room because they need the world to be perfect. And there's a vast difference between those two things. And I will rearrange the furniture in the world to make my body feel right. So it's almost like, for me, it's another step. And that's my just right OCD, which is like another step beyond perfectionism. So I will walk into my space and say, something's wrong. What's wrong? That's what it is. I have to fix it right this second. And everything else has to wait. But at the same time, my brain is saying, nope, nothing else can wait. You were in the middle of a task. So now I have to multitask on like 12 levels. So I'll fix the painting. I'll adjust it. If I walk into somebody else's space, like I walk into my therapist's office, and she's really good about this, she'll deliberately make things crooked before my appointment. And it really stinks now because I do all my appointments virtually because of the pandemic. And I can't fix the things that are in her office, and she does it on purpose. It's behind her, like on the wall on a video screen. And I see the stuff is crooked and she just smiles because she knows I can't do anything about it. But part of the ERP she would do with me is I'd walk into her office and I'd notice a book was out of place or a bag had been moved, and she'd wait for me to notice it, and she'd say something like, "You want to move it, don't you?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And she'd say, "Sorry, sit down, start the session." And make me kind of just suffer through it, which is good. I need to do that. But if I walk into somebody else's space, I can sometimes push through that jellyfish sting feeling because it's not my space. And I can say, well, this doesn't belong to me. I can push through this. But if it's an intensity, like the therapist's office is my space for that 50 minutes, it's my safe place. I need it to be perfect for my therapy. But in reality, for my therapy to be good, I have to accept that it's not going to be perfect. So that's why she would do those things. But if I walk into, let's say, a grocery store and there's a new display that wasn't there last time I was there, that's that intensity, that jellyfish sting, where it might have been a 5 if I walk into my therapist's office on a scale of 1 to 10. It's a 5 that her painting is crooked and I've got to suffer through it for my therapy. If I walk into the grocery store and there's a brand new display that I don't like, that jellyfish sting is now going to be an 8. But I can't do anything about it because it's not my space. And for the good of the other million customers that come through that store, I cannot do anything about it. I can't for social reasons. I can't for the sake of the other customers. I can't because I don't want to go to jail. I can't because, all these things, there's right and wrong and all these other reasons I can't move that big display. I have to suffer through it. So it used to be I would, ignore it and go another way in the store, or sometimes I would leave the store and come back another time. But now there have been times I've stood and stared at it until I just had to accept it. But now I just I do my mental, I don't even know what to call it, but I call it my, I don't know how to explain this, but there's I guess it's, it may be very American, but there's if I say, "Ooh, saw," does that make sense to you?
Oh, a film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know which film, but
I think it's from Caddyshack.
Okay.
Kind of that, "Ooh, saw," kind of like that. It may not be Caddyshack, I don't know, but it's so ingrained in American culture. If someone goes, "Ooh, saw," you know what they mean. It's like that yoga, that deep breath, just kind of cleansing of just deal with it, suck it up and move on kind of thing. But yeah, I kind of have to go, "Ooh, saw," just kind of deal with it. And I kind of have to do that, suck it up and move on, and either walk around this new display and just accept the fact that it's there, and hey, it won't be there next time. No one died to put that display there, I hope.
Yeah, that we know of.
That we know of, right?
There's certainty.
Right, yeah. I can just assume no one died. I would hope that they didn't leave it there if they did. There'd be a marker, I would hope,
True.
And I use humor a lot too. I mean, I think you've gotten to know me a little bit, well enough to know that I will laugh about pretty much anything. If I can make a joke about it, it makes it better.
Yeah.
And that really does help. We are a very uptight species, and that obviously depends on where we're from and how we grew up. But if I can make a joke about something without hurting or offending people, I will, because it does help to laugh. And if we can laugh at things, in all earnesty, if we can laugh at it without hurting people, and it makes it so much easier. If I can say, yeah, no one died putting this display up. Maybe they did. Oh God, that'd be horrible if someone died putting this display up. Well, at least there could be a marker. There could be a headstone or something. It's the least they could do. Put a Nestle cookie with a date on it. Something to make it nice. Put out a spread. Put a wake table out or something. But they didn't do that, so clearly no one died. So yeah. But yeah.
Nice. No, I agree. Humor is important. Okay, so where's my questions gone? Actually, yeah. So tell me to shut up on this one if you want. But I'm just, you mentioned a year and 2 years ago you met your birth parents or biological parents.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was weird. So for my 40th birthday, my mom bought me a DNA kit, and I won't say what brand because I don't know if there's a copyright reason I can't mention them, but I just, for the safety, I won't say who. But my mom bought me that as a gift because for 40 years, I've gone to the doctors for whatever reason, or the dentist or whatever, and you always have to fill out the forms that say, any history of cancer in your family, any history of diabetes in your family, what's your blood type, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Yeah. I'd always have to leave it blank. And then I get grilled by the nurse. You left this form blank. I don't have a history. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I'm adopted. Well, don't you know anything? No, I don't know anything. I know I'm asthmatic and I know my blood type is A negative. That's all I know. and they would always have to ask me 1,000 questions more because I left the page blank and I couldn't answer the 1,000 more questions because I didn't know. So, you know, now that these kits are available at, you know, every grocery store on the shelf, my mom said, well, I'm going to get you one for your birthday. So for my 40th birthday, I filled out the kit. I spent 45 minutes spitting into a tube, and I mailed it off. And 3 weeks later, I got my results. And they, you know, it turns out my husband likes to joke I'm half Wookiee, half Neanderthal, and part, you know, Baby Yoda or something. So so my my results are loaded onto a website, and I was reading all about it, and it says, do you want, you know, any DNA relatives to contact you if they're found? And I hadn't thought about that. And so I talked to my mom and my dad and my sister, and I said, this is a real possibility. And my mom immediately said, well, yeah, I figured that might happen. I don't have a problem with it. And my dad was like, whatever, you know, typical military alpha male, whatever. I don't care. It's your life.
I don't have feelings.
Whatever. Yeah. You know, and my sister was like, oh my gosh, you can find your biological family. What if they're famous? What if they're, you know, better than us? What if they're worse? What if they're, you know, whatever? And she came up with like the worst possible example of people and the best possible example of people. And I thought, okay, well, whatever. I'll check the box. And if I decide I don't want to do it, I'll uncheck the box. So I checked the box and immediately found, like, you know, your 14th cousin twice removed is blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, this is what it's going to be? I don't care. Fine. And it was about 6 or 8 months of getting those emails. And I finally went in and started to refine the search that I didn't want anyone beyond third cousin. Because I was getting, like, you know, every day I was getting emails, and my anxiety was going through the roof because it was like ding, 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 ding notifications of, you know, your 18th cousin, your 15th cousin, your 8th cousin. And then I was at a friend's house, and we were getting ready to leave and go on a hike. And no, we were getting ready to leave and go to his pool because he lived in an apartment complex. We just come back from a hike. And my smartwatch buzzed, and it said, it was a text, and it said, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I found your cell phone number through your work website, and I sent you this exact same message through the DNA website, so forgive the copy and paste. And I was like, wait, what? So I immediately pulled out my phone and started reading the text, or the text message, and it said, I'm your biological sister. And my knees gave out. It never occurred to me I might have siblings. Because I thought, if I'm adopted, if I was given up for adoption, why would my biological parents keep having kids? Or why would they have a kid and then give up the next kid? So it never occurred to me that siblings were a possibility. And I went into a full panic attack.
Yeah.
And I hyperventilated. Like, it was back to the Jello mold on the floor kind of panic attack. Thank God I wasn't by myself. And so my friend, you know, picked me up and put me on this. He had this bench by his door that you could put your shoes on. It was a bench, and then underneath were shelves. And he put me on that bench, and he was like, what do I do? And he knew I had, I keep this thing in my glove box that we call my crisis kit. And it's got, like, you know, like lavender spray, like essential oils, and like my fidget spinner, and, like, you know, like rubber bands and things I can, like, if I am really in a nervous state, I can play with. So he ran out to my car and got my crisis kit. And I use it so seldom that I kind of forgot what was in there. And he's pulling out, like, earbuds to plug in and play, like, soothing music. And, like, he's spraying lavender spray all over the house. And I'm like, none of this is helping. Like, this is a full-blown panic attack. This is not like I'm nervous before going into a store kind of crisis kit stuff. None of this stuff is going to help. So I'm sitting there shaking. I'm holding the phone and shaking so much I can't read it. And I'm crying. And I don't know if I'm crying because I'm happy, or crying because I'm sad, or crying because I'm in shock. And I am saying words that don't make sense. So I hand him the phone, and he starts reading it to me. And then I start, like, that full on, like, Oprah Winfrey ugly cry, where it just snot and like sobbing and like this, like no words are coming out, and he can't understand me and I can't hear what he's saying. So we just take a break. And he brings me like hot tea, and I curl up on his couch with his little pug dog, and he like piles blankets on me until I just like sweat it out. And finally I read the text. And then I think, what if this is a scam? What if this is some random lady who found me on Facebook and like decided to like, I don't know, play a prank on me for some reason? And it occurred to me, I never went to the DNA website to see if she was telling the truth. I just spent like what felt like days having a panic attack, which was probably, 20 minutes. So I decided to go check out the DNA website, and I pull it up and it says right there, she's a 50% match. She's my half sister. And I was like, oh my God, this is real. What do I do? So I replied, and I have no idea what I said to her. I just started typing, like rapid succession typing. I don't think I typed that fast in my life. And she wrote back within seconds, and she said, I haven't told our mom yet. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's the next step. Like, so my mom is like, my biological mom is like right there, like, not like literally, but they're in touch. Now I'm thinking, not only do I have a sibling, she wasn't given up for adoption either, or she wasn't given up for adoption. And so she's in touch with one of my biological parents. So that's the next step. So now I'm like hyperventilating again. I'm like, what do I do about this? So I said, okay, I can't take any more right now. So I said, let's plan a time to like, let me breathe. She's all excited. She's like, oh my gosh, I have a brother. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a sister, another sister. So I said, let's regroup. Let me catch my breath, metaphorically and realistically. And I said, let's regroup. Let me take a few days. Let me figure this out. And let's have an honest conversation about this in a few days. So we planned a date. And she was still in the hometown, or her hometown is where I was born and, put up for adoption. And she lives down the street from our biological mother. Fast forward to a few months later, I'm on a video call with my biological mom and my biological sister. I learn all about the family history, and my parents and my sister have met my half sister and her family because they came to Florida right before the pandemic. They came in January. Of course, the pandemic hit in March here. Well, yeah, full blown here in March. They came to Disney World, and we all went down to Disney to meet them. And we had a great day. It was just like, it was meant to be that we were siblings. Like, it's just natural. Like, almost like we've known each other our whole lives. I stay in very close contact virtually with my biological mother. They live down the street. They didn't even know it. They'd lost touch with my biological dad, who is not her biological dad. He lives down the street from them, and they didn't even know it. They'd lost touch, with all the years in between that there was no social media or internet. Again, age. And they drove by his house probably 100 times a day over the years and didn't know he lived there. And he and I have become very close. And it is very weird, but I've learned so much about the genetics of OCD. It definitely runs in the family. And I don't want to give up any of their story because I didn't have permission to talk about their stuff. But I will say that some of my biological line has Asperger's. Some of it has OCD. Some of it has ADHD. I will proudly say that none of that bothers me. I think that's all good stuff to know and stuff to learn from, and it makes me who I am. Both of my biological parents have extremely high IQs. My biological sister and I are 1 point difference in our IQs, which has now become a point of contention. She is she's younger than I am, and I'm now a big brother, which is fun because my entire life I've been the little brother. Um, and she's given me another nephew to love on, which is great. Um, and according to the DNA site, she's 56% Neanderthal, and I'm only 54% Neanderthal. So of course I hold that over her head that she's more of a caveman than I am, which I think is hysterical. So it's been really great. My family has been so accepting of them as part of my family. But it's fun, and it's also kind of weird to suddenly have four parents and two sisters. But yeah, it's been a really I don't want to say odd because that sounds bad, but odd in the unusual, unexpected way. It's been an odd part of the journey I didn't expect. I didn't know was going to happen. To learn something that people have suspected for years, for generations. Scientists and doctors have said, well, we know there's a genetic component to OCD. We know there can be things can be handed down, nature versus nurture, all that stuff. But we don't really have anything concrete. And I'm not saying that I'm the case study for that, but I was given up for adoption at birth, like within seconds of being born, put into foster care, and then adopted by the family that raised me, who they are my family. They are my parents. I've never looked at them as anything other than they're my mom and dad and my sister. So I definitely have that nurture from them, and a lot of my personality is formed by them. But then I look at these people who I've never known for 40 years, didn't know anything about them. And we have the same taste in music. We have the same taste in food. We have the same personality traits. We joke about the same things. We have the same sense of humor about things. We have a lot of the same favorite movies. And we have the same mental health disorders. And we didn't know each other. There's no nurture involved in that. There's definitely, and my husband jokes all the time, and I'll put ranch dressing, which is my favorite condiment, in the world. I'll put ranch dressing on anything, and I'll put it on something. And he's like, I wonder if you're, and we refer to my biological mom by a nickname. He'll say, I wonder if she does that. And I'll text her and I'll say, I just put ranch dressing on this. And she'll go, I do that. And he's like, there's no gene for that, And I will say, it's another thing. My biological father is gay. Which also, there's always been a part of the nature versus nurture debate. And my biological mother I have a sign in my house that says, cats are like potato chips. You can't have just one. And I got that as a gift from my mom for Christmas one year. And my biological mother has the exact same sign she got in a thrift store in Michigan. And my mom got it at a thrift store in Florida. It's the exact same brand, exact same font, exact same everything. And my husband, Jeff, says, there's no gene for that. It's like his go-to remark now. There's no gene for that. Like, I don't know how 40 years apart in, 1,000 miles apart, and there's no gene for that. So it's
that we know of.
Yeah, that we know of. Yeah, there's a gene for thrift store shops.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I love sharing that. That's, again, a longer answer than you expected, but
no, that's fine. Well, one thing that came to me was that it sounds like, because you were obviously happy with your parents that raised you and your family,
absolutely,
which I would assume is probably why you had I'm just assuming here, you had no desire to sort of search for your biological parents. So it was kind of a happy mistake that it happened, or
absolutely.
Coincidence, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is, was it kind of healing meeting them anyway, even though you didn't realize you wanted to meet them or never had an inclination to meet them? Was there any healing that went on? You can.
There was
no.
a lot of guilt from my biological mom, because there were all these years that she didn't know how I was going to react if she ever found me. She felt so guilty having to give me up, and it was circumstantial. It was all based on the way her life was going at the time. She didn't want to give me up. It wasn't like, she was forced into it, or there was any, ulterior motive or anything like that. She just couldn't care for me at that time and place in her life. And, she'd considered every single option that there was. Including keeping me. And she just made the choice kind of at the last minute, not to get an abortion. She'd considered that, and just circumstantially waited too long. Then she decided she was going to keep me, and then circumstances didn't allow for that. And then at the last possible minute, it was, okay, are you keeping this baby? You've literally had this baby. What are you going to do? And she said, I can't. He's going to be better off with someone else. And literally gave me over to, I think, a nun. her half Jewish baby, she gave over to a nun and said, here, a nun nurse, and said, here. And he was given to a loving couple who had been wanting a baby boy. And I think there was a tremendous amount of guilt on her end. But once she spoke to me for the first time, and she cried it all out and said, I'm so sorry. And I said, you have nothing to be sorry about. Look at my life. You giving me up was the best thing that could have happened for me, because look at how I've turned out. And the fact that I have two moms and two dads who love me so much, I'm so blessed. And I that's not a word I use. It's just not in my vocabulary, as people throw that word around a lot, as I'm so blessed I got a good parking space. And to me, it's overused. When I say it, I truly mean it. I am very blessed to have 4 loving parents. And they really are. So yeah, I definitely lucked out. I got more than my share. So yeah, circumstantially, it's been amazing. So yeah, I did not plan on seeing them ever in my lifetime. I never sought them out. And there's definitely been healing because of her giving up that guilt. And I'm sure she still harbors some guilt, because that's human nature, but yeah, not on my end. No guilt at all. All good.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that and going into
it. Of course.
And obviously it did loop back to OCD anyway. So
you were waiting, right?
No,
like, where is he going with this?
Sometimes I'm like, I shouldn't ask this, but I have a feeling. So I go with it.
You're going to edit this show down to 5 minutes and cut all that out anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess in your recovery or therapy, what has been like an epiphany moment or light bulb or something where something just clicked and you just got it,
There's been so many. I think every time I'm in a group therapy session or I talk to somebody else that has OCD, and it goes both ways, that someone says, oh, I didn't know that was an OCD thing, or I say it, that's a pivotal moment. It's almost, it can even be a watershed moment, that you don't realize that something you do or someone else realizes something they do is an OCD thing, because we spend a lot of our lives in the shadows because of the stigma of OCD. And I'm sure you've experienced it. I'm sure your loved ones have experienced it. Like, I said, I plucked my nose hairs because it's something people don't see. Right. I've woken up in the middle of the night with my fingers in my mouth because in my dream state, I'm anxious, and I've bitten my cuticles down to the point that they're bloody. And I don't remember necessarily what it was in the dream that made me so anxious, but I've bitten all my fingernails off. And I talk about that in group, and people say, oh my gosh, I've done that. I didn't know that was an OCD thing. Or the counting the laundry, counting in your head, not out loud, that's OCD. I thought it only counted, pun intended. I thought it only counted if you did it where people could see it, Um, so yeah, I think any of those things are light bulb moments.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. I agree. Whether it's support groups or a conference or maybe just for an Instagram post,
Yeah.
or someone listened to this podcast and they hear
Yeah.
something you've said, which is no doubt going to happen. They're like, I never realized that.
Yeah. I think I always say like speaks to like,
Mm.
and it happens with anything, whether it's OCD or, race or sexual orientation or nationality. When you find someone that you have a connection to, you're drawn to them. Kim Vincenti, who you've had on the show, the president of OCD Jacksonville, she and I were being interviewed on the local news about an OCD Jacksonville event. And I shared the story, a very short version, of the hit and run incident that I had. If anyone who was fast forwarding through my story, I didn't actually hit and run, but the hit and run obsession that I had. I shared that story on the news, and someone said, I've done that. And he was 67, 68 years old. And that was the moment that he said, I do that a lot. I think I've hit someone with my car and I actually haven't. And I'll drive around and redrive the entire route until I convince myself I didn't do it. And he turned to his wife and said, that's the thing I have. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he said, I have that. I have OCD. And he didn't know he had OCD or even thought he had OCD until he saw that interview. And he came to the event just to tell us that. And now he's in therapy.
Amazing.
Like speaks to like.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And it just shows the importance of getting information out there through different mediums. Yeah. Okay. So I guess general question, just like words of hope for anyone listening.
Oh, don't give up. That sounds trite, but in your darkest, scariest moment, in your worst panic attack, when you're that plate of Jell-O on the floor, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Don't give up. And it's up to you to decide if the light at the end of the tunnel is sunshine or an oncoming train, because it's going to be one or the other. And if you choose that it's an oncoming train, that's it. You're done. You've given up. If you choose that it's sunlight, then move forward. Find that sunlight, just keep moving through that tunnel because you're going to get there. If you stay put, you're never going to know. And that if it is a train, it's going to hit you. If it's not a train, you'll never know that it's sunlight. So just keep moving forward and you're going to find it. Because you know what? That little monster in your brain's going to tell you it's a train, whether it is or not. So ignore the voice and go find the sunlight.
Yeah. Nice. Really nice. Yeah. Okay. And so you can pick up the phone, call the 20-year-old Mike. What'd you tell him?
Oh, 20-year-old Mike. Oh gosh. 20 years old, I was working in a karaoke bar. I was the host of a karaoke show on Saturday nights at a bar that no longer exists. And I was too young to drink. In the United States, you have to be 21 to drink. So I would I would bar back. I would take drinks from the bar to the tables between, like when I had a patron come up on the stage and sing, I would go and get the drinks and serve from behind the bar, because you can serve at 18, you just can't drink. Yeah. So I would sneak drinks, and my show would get much, much better. I was a much more entertaining host after a couple of after I'd sneak a few drinks. Yeah. So I would tell my 20-year-old self, don't sneak as many drinks, pay more attention to what you're doing, and you can enjoy life naturally. But I would also tell my 20-year-old self, get help sooner, because I think had I paid attention to my symptoms and not relied on the coping mechanisms of ignorance. When you're 20, you're still young and dumb. And I would party as a coping mechanism. And I don't mean, I didn't have an alcohol abuse problem, but at 2021, you'll try just about anything to make the OCD voices stop. I would tell myself, listen to those OCD voices, because they're trying to tell you something. And at that age, they were probably trying to tell me to get help earlier than I did. So yeah, get some therapy, and don't coat it with alcohol. Yeah. Humor is a much better drug.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. Okay, so you've got a billboard in Jacksonville. What do you want written on that billboard?
Well, the political climate in Jacksonville does not agree with my personal political climate, okay. So I will avoid what I'd want it to actually say right now. Actually, no, I wouldn't. I would make it a combination. I'm going to say keep on fighting, because that works for both. My personal mantra and my political mantra, keep on fighting. Yeah, I'm not really happy with our local politicians right now. So I'm going to say keep on fighting, because that applies to my fight against them. And I'm going to leave it at that. I won't get political. I'm just going to say that. And I'm going to say for myself, keep on fighting, because I think that's something we all need to do for ourselves. Yeah. Keep on fighting for what you believe in. Keep on fighting for yourself. Keep on fighting for your mental health, and fight the stigma. That's huge. I mean, there's so many things we stigmatize in this world, especially in this country, but mental health is the big one. We have racial stigmas, we have sexual orientation stigmas. Those are big. In my world, they're big, but the mental health stigma is worldwide. And that's something we really need to fight. We need to fight the stigma. OCD is not an adjective. You've heard all those things, but they're true. End the stigma on all mental health. So keep fighting. Yeah, nice. And then lastly, is there anything else that you wish you could have said or shared today? No. No, because if I start another story, you'll be in the editing room all night. You'll have to have me on again. I can share more stories. Nice. Will do, yeah. Well, wait a year, though. Give the audience some time to recoup. Okay. But I really appreciate you coming on and obviously sharing your story and stories. I really enjoyed it. So no doubt parts of it have resonated with many people. So hopefully. Yeah. Thank you, Stuart. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again in person when all of this stuff is over with. It's going to be another year probably, but you know what? We're going to fight it and stay healthy, please. Yeah, I'll do my best. Thank you. And likewise. Right. So there you have it. Thank you so much to Mike for his openness and honesty, and to you guys for listening. And if the podcast has helped you anyway, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review on whatever podcast app you listen to this to, as it helps me reach more people and spread this information. And of course, the episode is sponsored by OCD, and they are now in the UK. And if you want to find out more about that, click the link in the episode description. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.